All right. Well, that has my old title on it. I'm actually the director, not the stewardship program coordinator, but that's all right. So the Sourland Conservancy, hold on a second. The Sourland Conservancy is a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting, promoting, and preserving the Sourland Mountain region. And the Sourlands is an area in central New Jersey. And it's right in that blue spot. If you look at my screen, there's this little blue spot in the central New Jersey, and it is the largest contiguous forest in central New Jersey. And it's a really important migratory stopover part for neotropical birds. It also is a really wonderful refuge for other animals, endangered species, and endangered plant species as well. This map right here is actually looking and showing you what the carbon sink is for central New Jersey. And you can see right here that the Sourland is such a powerhouse as far as carbon sequestration. And one of the big issues that's happening right now is that we're going to be losing over 1 million ash trees in the next few years to the emerald ash borer. So it's really, really critical that we understand what's happening to our streams in the Sourlands. So this map right here is a topographic map, and it shows in blue through this area, you can see the water bodies. And something that's really unique about the Sourlands is its diabase rock. Diabase has really slow and poor filtration. So it takes a really long time for water to sink down into the bedrock and into the underground reservoirs. And so you get a lot of these perched wetlands, and you can see that right through the middle of the Sourland Ridge. And so when we're thinking about what's going to be happening with the Sourlands and that we're losing all these ash trees, how is that going to affect water quality? And it's going to, and it's going to affect it in a really big way. And that's really important, one, for just the whole ecosystem function. If you don't have clean water and a water source that can provide resources to humans and to animals, you're going to have a lot of downstream problems. So in the Sourlands, there's 17 headwaters that filter out into the Raritan and Delaware and give water for millions of people in New Jersey and Philadelphia. But also these water resources provide habitat for macro aquatic invertebrates. Aquatic macroinvertebrates, oh my goodness, too much coffee already this morning. Aquatic macroinvertebrates, which is basically a huge food resource for many other organisms, so for fish and for birds and for mammals as well. So if we don't have healthy streams, if we don't have good water quality, it's going to affect us in so many different ways. We're going to have issues with collapsing trophic levels because there's not that water and food resource. So it's really important that we understand what's happening in our water and we understand the impacts of this ash decline. So our program started because there was a need, and people were really excited about learning about the Sourland streams. And we really wanted to connect these 2 points together, where we had locals that really wanted to know what's happening and a lack of data. So we had applied for and received a Watershed Institute small grants program to start a stream monitoring program. And something about the Sourland Conservancy is that we really love to partner. We love collaborating with other organizations. So for this stream monitoring program, we collaborated with the Watershed Institute, NJDEP, and New Jersey Watershed Ambassadors. And so in the first iteration of this program, we reached out to New Jersey Watershed Ambassadors and the Watershed Institute and Mercer County Park Commission to host a stream monitoring workshop. And so this workshop was given by Fairfax Hutter. You can see her right there with our volunteers. And it was to give a taster of what stream monitoring is. How do you go about collecting biological data? So that's our aquatic macroinvertebrates. And also, what do you do about collecting habitat data? What does the area look like around the stream in your riparian zone? And so this is just a really fun hands-on workshop. And, you know, locals were really interested and they wanted to know more and they wanted to get involved more. And so we decided to take it a next step further. And so what we did then was that we paired up people that participated in this workshop with Fairfax to do what we called an apprenticeship. And basically that's just a continuation of that workshop. So they got to go out with her and get their hands in the stream and collect more data with her. And this was helpful for the Watershed ambassador because having an extra pair of hands is always great. But it also really started to pull our volunteers in and have them have a deeper understanding rather than just a one weekend workshop, but to go out and implement this over and over again. And so after we had such great success with our little weekend workshop, we decided we wanted to take it a step further. And we created our stream program, the Sourland Team of Resource Ecology and Monitoring. And what this was and how it's different is that most stream monitoring programs that are done by volunteers collect data at a tier 1 level or a community level. And what that means is that that data can be used to maybe do a water quality report, but it cannot be used in a legislative way. So if we go to a stream and we find that the water quality is really degraded or the habitat quality is really degraded, we can say it was from this source, whether it was this polluter or some other reason. We can't go after that polluter and say, hey, you are mucking up our streams because this data is not rigorous enough. But if you are able to collect data that is tier 3, what that does, it makes your data more robust because of the training that goes into that and the certification process that goes into it. So Watershed ambassadors have that certification. And so we wanted to make a way that our volunteers could also get that level of certification so that they could make a real difference. Not to say that tier 1 data is meaningless, it's not, but it doesn't have that same, it doesn't have the same bite to it that we can make those changes that we need to and tell, you know, New Jersey DEP that's saying, hey, these people are polluting or this organization is polluting, we need to stop it. So our stream monitoring volunteers really wanted to collect that meaningful and useful data. And we could also track streams health in a scientific, rigorous manner. And this was really important to us, especially with this ash decline, because a lot of the streams that we are monitoring as the Sourland Conservancy are not being monitored by anybody else. So if we want to go forward and do forest restoration, we need to know what the baseline is for these streams. And since there is no data on that, on these streams, we want to make sure that we could at least have a baseline and then target different areas for restoration. So to us, stream monitoring and forest restoration go hand in hand. So we had a lot of planning meetings to figure out how to make our stream monitoring program happen. So there's planning meetings with NJDEP and Watershed Institute and New Jersey Watershed ambassadors, and just figuring out how can we do this together as a team, because there's a lot of different organizations and each different organizations had their own agenda. But at the same time, we all had the same goal of clean water. So where can we find those intersections between the different organizations and work together to make it happen? And so this was one of the more challenging part, was writing our QAPP. It had to be submitted to NJDEP. And so when we did this, I based off our QAPP from the New Jersey Watershed Ambassadors QAPP. And I had a lot of guidance from Erin, who's going to be talking later about the nitty gritty of how we actually got this done. And if you are part of an organization or a municipality, and this is something you want to embark on and be able to do this type of water monitoring, I really recommend reaching out to the Watershed Institute and Erin and asking for help. Her help was invaluable. I couldn't have done it without her. It's a very technical document, and having that feedback back and forth was really, really useful. So once we got our QAPP written, we chose our locations and obtained permission for water sampling. Unlike at the ocean, where you can walk in the ocean, it's not owned by anybody, as long as you're walking, on that shoreline where the water is. It's not the same for streams. The landowner owns the stream bottom, so you have to make sure you ask for permission before obtaining any type of water sampling or riparian sampling, habitat sampling. So we specifically chose land that was publicly owned. And so again, more partnerships. We partner with DNR Greenway and Phobos and Hillsborough Park Commission to get permission to collect this data on their property. And this teamwork and this communication between different organizations just makes everything better. So that's one of my big advice points, is talk to other organizations and cooperate and communicate with them. So once we got all that QAPP stuff in the works, we did a continuation of our stream monitoring workshop by doing Stream School. And Stream School is something that Watershed Ambassadors have to do to get certified. And so because I wanted our stream monitors to also be certified, they did the same thing. So this is different than our little spring taster workshop that we had done with the Watershed Ambassadors. The spring stream monitoring workshops is a 2-hour virtual, well, during the pandemic it was virtual, but it's a 2-hour in-person talk about stream monitoring and water quality issues, and then a 2-hour hands-on, getting in the stream, getting your hands dirty, and actually collecting some data. Stream School is a 2 full-day intensive stream monitoring program, and it's taught by professionals in the field, such as Erin. We also had New Jersey DEP employees there and giving presentations and really getting to the nitty-gritty of these aquatic macroinvertebrate identification, as well as collecting habitat assessment data. It was just a whole other level of commitment. And so we had felt it was really good to have our volunteers first do a spring workshop. We called it a taster, to see if they actually like stream monitoring, then have them do an apprenticeship. And if they really still liked it, then we sent them to Stream School. It's a lot of time investment on the volunteers' part, and it's a big investment on the organization's part too, to send somebody to Stream School, because we did not charge them for this. So we really wanted to make sure that the volunteers that were participating were really fully committed into doing the program to its fullest extent, and going out and staying with us as volunteers and continuing to help us on this program. This really created a very collaborative and very friendly environment, and there was a lot of feedback between the instructors and the students. And of course, if you know me, I love to feed people. So we gave them really good food during their entire time they were with us. And again, for me, it's really important that we engage our volunteers in a really friendly, collaborative environment. So when you're doing these workshops, they can be really, really long. We're talking 8-hour days on a Saturday and a Sunday. So doing whatever you can to make your volunteers feel appreciated, I think, is really, really important. And so here are just some pictures of our volunteers out collecting data and practicing their skills for aquatic or biological assessment data. This is all pre-pandemic. There's no masks in this picture. And here again, they are sorting out their macros back in the lab. So during the winter, what we wanted to do was an overwintering monthly quizzes. This is our stream school was held in September of 2019. So in the winter, what we did was monthly quizzes. We would send out an online quiz and they would have to identify different macroinvertebrates. We also gave incentives because it was a little hard to still keep people engaged as we were doing these check-ins, doing these quizzes. And then we also sent check-ins. So that was me reaching out to somebody if they had not done their quiz, and just, again, keeping that personal connection with our volunteers. And then we collaborated with more people. We worked with Lambertville Goes Wild, Hunterdon Landtrust, DNR Greenway, and Hillsborough Township to help host these stream monitors to go to different locations, as well as to do more workshops in the spring for the spring taster. And then for stream school graduation, what there is a field practical. So after you do all your winter quizzes in the spring for the graduation, you have a field practical, a lab practical. We wanted to have a little celebration and certification for these volunteers because they put in so much time. But unfortunately, COVID-19 happened right when we were going to be doing our graduation celebration and certification process. So when COVID-19 happened, we postponed all in-person events. We still held virtual workshops for stream monitoring, but we could not do our stream school because we could not get people in person, and you needed to have the in-person component for doing our audits or our certification process. So everything kind of was put on hold. However, we did send veteran stream monitors. So these are folks that had done stream monitoring with us in previous years or had attended the training for stream school to go out with somebody that they were quarantined with and just collect some community level data, because we didn't want everything to stop because of COVID-19, but we could not continue the program the way we had been planning to do it. So in 2021, we've done a half virtual, half in person program for our stream monitoring program for the spring. And field work this year will include new monitors, and we are going to do a stream school this year to get our stream monitors actually certified to go collect that tier 3 data. So last year in 2020 and in this year, the data that we're collecting is still the community level data, but once we are able to do our stream school fully with the certification process, then they will be able to go ahead and collect that tier 3 data. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin, but I wanted to thank the Watershed Institute, NJDEP, our watershed ambassadors. We had 2 great watershed ambassadors this year, Amanda and Cameron. They did wonderful jobs. Mercer County Park Commission, our stream monitoring volunteers, and Sourland Conservancy members and volunteers. So if there's any questions, I see a few questions. Okay. All right. Well, those questions I think we could answer after Erin's section. So Erin, are you able to share your screen?
Yes, let me get that going.
Okay.
Okay. All right, can you see that? Everything's showing up?
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. And I think it's really so valuable to be able to get that kind of firsthand perspective, especially, since I'll be talking about more of the technical aspects of how groups can get started and start their own programs. So it's nice to hear that the Sourland Conservancy could do this. I mean, you guys started from scratch a few years ago and learned everything along the way and prepared entire quality assurance project plans, and now it's about to pay off. So I'm so thrilled to hear about the progress. But I'm Erin Stretz. I'm from the Watershed Institute in Central New Jersey. I started at the Watershed Institute in 2011, managing our own monitoring program. That's called Streamwatch. And I was kind of trucking along with that for 8-ish years, learning everything I could about volunteer monitoring and about how to administer these programs firsthand. And then I kind of got into this opportunity in the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network to then facilitate that for other groups. So what the Watershed Watch Network is it's a service provider where we will work with any environmental group or municipality or academia, whatever, across the state of New Jersey to help them learn about community monitoring, help them build their own programs, and hopefully submit that data to DEP to be used for regulatory assessment. So can you see this bar on the bottom of my screen? Is it covered? Sometimes that happens. Okay, cool. All right, so the Sourland Conservancy, you can see on this map, we have the red dots, which are active monitoring. The Sourland Conservancy are one of these red dots because they are actively conducting water quality monitoring, and the other one is the Watershed Institute, where I'm from. But we have a network overall throughout the state of 49 participants. 31 of these are actively conducting some type of monitoring, whether that's chemical, microbiological, or habitat, or macroinvertebrate, fish, algae. But we also have groups in the network who are conducting monitoring at more of an educational level. So if you take a group of first graders out into a stream and show them the bugs that live on the bottom of the rocks, or give them a little test strip to dip in the water, that's still water quality monitoring. It's just at a different data quality level, and the objectives are different at that level. We also have listed in the yellow dots groups that are interested in monitoring, those who have reached out to me or to someone else at DEP to say, hey, we want to work with you, we want to get our own program going. So if you are from an organization and you either have your organization listed on this map and you want to change your status, or if you want to join our network and just, there's really no official joining process. It's just, do you want to work on monitoring in the state of New Jersey? If the answer is yes to that, let me know, contact me, and I would be happy to start a conversation with you. This map is available, by the way, at our website, njwatershedwatch.org, and you can click on the dots and get a list of all of the organizations that show up. But before I get into the meat of what the network is and what we do, I kind of want to explain who we are, because it is a little bit confusing. So the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network is a program of the Watershed Institute. It's managed by me. I am employed by the Watershed Institute, but the program itself is funded by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. This community monitoring management task used to be housed within the department. And so they kind of are taking a different tack and funding an outside group, me, the Watershed Institute, to do the work of the agency. So even though it seems like me as a Watershed Institute employee is going around to all these groups and saying, this is what you need to do, that's not just my opinion. This is all of this work is kind of this collaborative effort between the Watershed Institute and between a team of people at DEP. We meet quarterly to discuss just issues of community monitoring in the state of New Jersey. And we have representatives from the Bureau of Freshwater and Biological Monitoring, from the assessment team, from the Office of Quality Assurance. And our goal is just to simplify this process and really do what we can to improve community monitoring in the state of New Jersey. So in our logic model, at the base of this pyramid, you have all of the resources that you need to put into a program in order to get to that next step to produce these activities, right? So the Watershed Watch Network, we are providing those resources. We are building the base of this pyramid so that other groups like you, perhaps, are actually going out to do the work, the activity of water quality monitoring itself. And of course, the reason that we're all doing this is to share this data with each other, whether that's through water quality report cards to your stakeholders, to your constituents, or sharing that data with the greater world by inputting it into the water quality portal and having it shared in the NJDEP integrated report of water quality assessments. And ideally, the outcomes of all of this work is that the streams that we're monitoring, either we're keeping an eye on the baseline and we're just watching it remain stable over time, or the data that we produce as community monitors could be used to designate a stream as category 1, meaning it's a very high quality, exceptional water that deserves greater protection. Or we could be listing streams on the 303D list, meaning that the water quality is impaired and we kind of need to take this other tack to try to improve that water quality. So we're trying to accomplish, of all the groups, 49 participants across the state of New Jersey, we're trying to accomplish these 3 main objectives. We're trying to get comprehensive data across the entire state. So you may notice that on the map, we do have a lot of these groups kind of aggregating in the more populous parts of the state, in central New Jersey, in the northeast New Jersey. But we really want to get into the Northwest and into the Pinelands and into South Jersey, where right now we don't have a whole lot of representation. We're trying to see consistent data being collected across all of these different groups. There are some organizations who have been monitoring for 30 years. And so they have this long history of collecting their data in a specific way and using their own methods and data sheets. But we want to make sure that that data is comparable with new groups that are popping up. We want to make sure that all of this data can kind of be compared to itself and to each other so that we can really assess how water quality changes geographically across the state and over time as well. And third, of course, we're looking for high quality data. Data that is of a known and sufficient quality to be used for regulatory assessment at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So how are we going to get there? For comprehensive data, we've conducted a monitoring inventory survey. That's how we got to that map of 49 participants. And this is like an ongoing kind of project because there's new groups that are popping up all the time. There's municipalities who see a water quality issue and they just kind of create their own monitoring program for a season. Or there's groups that are popping up and they either find funding for or just have an interest in beginning a new monitoring program. So first we needed to identify where all these groups were working to see where those data gaps were. And in those areas, we are working to incubate new monitoring programs. So the Sourland Conservancy, they were the first organization that we worked with, and they're really helping to fill in data gaps in the Sourland region. And we've moved on to the Rahway River Watershed Association, working in downtown Rahway, making sure we have real high quality data on the Rahway River. And next we're moving to the American Littoral Society, the Bayshore office in South Jersey. So if you want to be, a part of this network, again, just let me know and we can talk. As far as consistency goes, we've been developing standardized materials. The actual materials themselves, like the macroinvertebrate and habitat data assessment sheet, having one sheet that can be used for all the different programs and has a variety of different parameters that you'd be collecting data on. And it's just this one data sheet that can be used consistently across all these groups. That is helpful because eventually we're going to get to a point with the Watershed Watch Network where we want to also facilitate the data management. So what happens after you have this data filled out on your data sheet, then what? We're using that to standardize data management tools so you can enter it into an Access database based on the data sheet that you have. The other thing that I'm so glad that we've developed is our data quality tier description. So describing explicitly exactly what we're looking for groups who are getting started in monitoring, what quality assurance measures they need, what methods they need to use for different data uses. And I'll go over that in a minute. And for high quality data for regulatory assessment, for these groups that are just getting started or groups that are just hoping to rejigger their program, we're offering individualized technical assistance and volunteer training for that group's program volunteers. So some monitoring coordinators at different organizations may be really experienced in stream monitoring and they want to conduct their own training. They want to train their own volunteers in their own way. That's totally fine. What the Watershed Watch Network offers is just, if you are not so experienced or knowledgeable about water quality monitoring, we can jump in and help with stream school training. So our data quality tiers, they used to be, if you're an old timer in New Jersey, I guess like I am, we used to work on a 4-tier system, tier A, B, C, and D. Starting, I guess, the beginning of this year, officially, we have shifted over to a 3-tier system. Tier 1 level data can be used for informational purposes. Tier 2 level data can be used for targeting additional monitoring. And tier 3 is our regulatory level monitoring. At the tier 1, which is informational or educational, the primary uses for this kind of data would be to engage your community. So if you are expanding your organization's boundaries into a new town and you want to be able to share with them a little bit about their environment and kind of introduce your organization in this place, you could use some very basic tier 1 methods like test strips or just brief visual assessments to share with either the municipal representatives or with the community itself about how their water is faring. There are some very basic requirements for the tier 1 status. We do ask that folks operating at tier 1 just develop a study design. And a study design is an explanation of why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of groups will, and I've been guilty of this too, for sure. You jump into, okay, I'm going to collect macroinvertebrates and I'm going to do it in this place. Okay, I've got my study design. Wrong. There's a first step before you get to that where and what part. You need to decide why you're doing this. And that should really inform the rest of your study design. So if, for example, if you're deciding that the reason you're going to start monitoring is to provide data to your environmental educators that they can share with school students, they can use test strips. That's totally fine. So when you get down to the how you're going to do your testing and how much money you've got, you know, a pretty basic kind of testing operation would work for that process. But if from the jump you know that the reason that you want to monitor is to, I don't know, share your data with DEP, then the level of quality of your monitoring has to be much higher. You have to have greater precision and accuracy in that data in order to share that data with the state. So after you decide why you're monitoring, the next question is who you are sharing that data with. What are you going to do with that data? And this should help define like how you collect your data. Do you want to use paper data sheets? Do you want to submit using a Google form or Arc Online? There's a million different ways to collect and share our data. And then we're deciding on some very basic things like where we're monitoring, what we're monitoring, and how much money we have to spend. Of course, that's a really important indicator for us nonprofits, right? We can have huge goals, but it all comes down to the dollar and cents, right? So after you get your program designed, then you can move on to the technical part of your study design. And this is where the Watershed Watch Network can step in to assist you. We can help you select the exact monitoring sites if you like. So you may have a water body in mind, and we can do some aerial map analysis to figure out, okay, this site might be accessible and it's in a nice place because it's downstream of these tributaries and all of that goes into selection of sites. Then you can get into your monitoring personnel. Who's going to do the monitoring? Is it your own nonprofit staff, or are you going to engage volunteers? And this is an important note, so I'll mention it here. Even if you have a master's degree in limnology, let's say, and you are working for a nonprofit, and you are super experienced at water quality monitoring and you're a paid professional, you are still considered a volunteer monitor according to the state. That was something I kind of had to wrap my mind around when I first started in this field, because I'm like, well, I'm getting paid, I'm not a volunteer, I'm not a volunteer monitor. Well, volunteer monitoring is just this term that we use basically to refer to any external data that DEP might use. So as we go down this list, we get more specific about what we're trying to accomplish and where it is, the timeline, the frequency of monitoring, and how we're going to collect it. So the study design is what we would recommend for someone doing a tier 1 level project. At tier 2, the uses expand for this data because the requirements for that data quality also are expanded. So rather than just having a study design in place, which can be sort of informal and in just an internal document, a quality assurance project plan is a more formal document that one would put together to document their study design, to document their quality assurance measures, which are implemented to prevent errors before you sample. So for example, for our stream school, we would implement field audits, and this is the way that we test that volunteers know what they're doing in the field, so that we can have more assurance that when they go out there on their own, they're doing it the right way. Then we have quality control measures that are implemented to correct errors after sampling. So another sort of QA measure we would implement is sending out maybe 10, 15% of our preserved macroinvertebrate samples to another lab to be identified. And so we can say, how much consistency is there between these identifications? Are our volunteers, do they have the actual skills and knowledge that they should to be able to make these correct identifications? And the most important thing to know about the quality assurance project plans is that it should be approved and signed off on whoever is using that data. So if you are working with NOAA or with EPA or, I don't know, your county level organization, and they're giving you funding for a project and they're kind of a project partner, and if they're going to use that data, they should have, you know, some input into the QAPP development process early on. Because ultimately, you know, the worst thing that could happen is you spend all of this time and all these resources getting your monitoring program up and running, and you've collected all this data. It would be a real shame to find out after the fact that you're not meeting like the data quality objectives that this organization you thought would use your data is expecting. So that is a little note. Sorry, my cat is just making a pillow. So for Tier 2 targeting level data, the quality assurance project plan should be approved by whoever is using the data. But when you get into Tier 3 level monitoring, this is your regulatory level monitoring. And that means that the quality assurance project plan must be approved by DEP itself. And so we have defined the process for how QAPPs kind of move through the different bureaus at DEP. This used to be just kind of you emailed it to whoever and just crossed your fingers that that they would get it. But now we have a more structured process. So people would send their QAPP to me, and I would kind of run through a first glance, make edits, and we send it to the Bureau of Environmental Analysis, Restoration, and Standards. And then it goes to BFBM, to the Freshwater and Biological Monitoring, and then to the Office of Quality Assurance. So we now have this kind of pathway for QAPPs to be approved in a reasonable amount of time. And I will say that because Carolyn and the Sourland Conservancy were sort of the first group that we worked with, the QAPP approval process for them was a bear, and it took a really long time. But that's because we were kind of developing these processes from scratch. And so I just want to publicly thank Carolyn for her patience as we were kind of figuring out all of these different protocols and methods. So Carolyn is really paving the way for us to be able to provide this service to other groups much quicker and hopefully much easier. Another one of the requirements for Tier 3 monitoring is that you use approved methods. So for, I list here, one of the requirements is that you use a Watershed Watch Network approved macroinvertebrate collection method. I'll go into the description of those very briefly in a minute. But if you're doing like bacteriological monitoring and you're using the IDEX call alert system or enter alert to measure E. coli or enterococci, the IDEX system, this is just kind of this lab tool that you would use to enumerate bacteria. That is an approved method. That is kind of this widely used method. It is a standard method, but it is not approved by the DEP Office of Quality Assurance. So there's this differentiation there between Tier 2 types of monitoring where you're using a standard method, you kind of are doing something that's universally acknowledged. But again, at Tier 3, you have to have certified methods. So, in my example, the IDEX method is not officially certified by the Office of Quality Assurance. But that doesn't mean that it's a perfectly good tool to use for whatever your purpose is at a Tier 2 level. Excuse me, Panda. I need to press the button. Thank you. So this is kind of the difference here between the Tier 2 and Tier 3 data uses. At Tier 2, this is our targeting level. You can target specific research questions. If we were talking kind of at the top of this webinar of installing a restoration project, you could do monitoring before and after that project to measure the effectiveness of that project. You could use water quality monitoring to discover water quality in your area to target where you should be implementing these kinds of restoration projects. You can use Tier 2 data to create your own organizational water quality report cards to share with your constituents, with your members. And especially Tier 2 data can also be used to target additional advanced monitoring. So you can kind of use this as a screening tool, especially if you are light on funds. You can kind of do a lesser quality monitoring activity in a wide range of areas, and then target your more expensive and more like fancy types of monitoring where you think you should after that initial assessment. So with the Tier 3 data uses, you can do any of these Tier 2 things. Plus, that data can be submitted to DEP to be used for regulatory assessment, meaning that the assessment team would take that data into account when they are conducting watershed-wide assessments and HUC 14 assessments for the integrated report. So here is the path of data as it moves from your organization out into the world, out to DEP. As I mentioned, you're going to first start with the identification of a problem or just a research question that you have. That's going to lead you into your study design development, which will then go into your quality assurance project plan development and approvals. Once that's through, you can actually do the work in the field and collect all that data with your staff or your interns or your volunteers. And then at that point, once your QAPP is approved, you can share your data out with the world through the Water Quality Exchange. And this will lead to that data being displayed in the Water Quality Portal. So I have the link here, it's waterqualitydata.us. And this is a great tool, even if you just want to see water quality data in your region, visit that link and you can view all of the data that's been collected in your surface water around your area. This is a one-stop shop kind of database that combines USGS data, EPA data, state agency data, academic data, and community monitoring or volunteer collected data. Now this is for the Tier 2. So you can get your data into the Water Quality Portal at a Tier 2 as long as you have a QAPP. You have to upload your QAPP with your data. If you're getting into Tier 3, meaning your QAPP has been approved by DEP, that means that DEP will then, every 2 years, when they go to prepare their integrated report, they would pull your data out of the Water Quality Portal, do their own assessments, and then include your data in the actual integrated report. I'll briefly go over these macroinvertebrate methods that are approved. This is at the Tier 3 level, meaning that data collected using these methods could be used to submit for regulatory purpose. We have these divided out into 3 different types of macroinvertebrate monitoring, and we're kind of using this good, better, best model. So under Tier 3.1, this is when the organism, it's kind of the AmeriCorps method, if you're familiar with that. You collect your bugs, you put them in a big bucket next to the stream, you swirl, you subsample, and you identify your 100 organism sample just right there on the stream. As you move up through these methods into method 3.2 and 3.3, you are preserving your bugs next to the stream in ethanol so that you can take it back to a lab to do your identification further down from the order family taxonomic level to family or genus. So at method tier 3.3, this is where you would send your sample out to a lab. Of course, that's going to produce the best data because we're identifying it down to genus or species, but this is going to be the most expensive option as well. So it's about $150 to $250 per sample to actually process the sample with the lab. Now, this takes the least amount of time, method 3.3. So if you don't want to require, testing or anything for your volunteers, but you have plenty of money, Tier 3.3 is going to be the option for you. But for groups who just want to do like an initial investment in the sampling supplies and the nets and boots and things, and they want their volunteers to learn a whole lot about macroinvertebrate identification, then the Tier 3.1 would work just fine. So we do require some testing at tier 3, and the requirements are different for each of these, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Field audits are required every 3 years for all volunteers, and basically this just means they do a collection and we watch and we make sure we have this checklist, we make sure that they're following everything on the checklist. The other thing is if the volunteers are identifying their own macroinvertebrates, then they have to take an identification test of 50 organisms, preserved or live specimens, and they have to pass at a 90% rate. That seems like a lot, and that seems like a lot of pressure. But we've had some pretty great success with Rahway River Watershed Association with their volunteers passing these tests. Even though they were really nervous when they took them, they did very well. And so I expect the same with Sourland Conservancy when we get to the actual accreditation for their group. And of course, we can work with any volunteer who feels uncomfortable to build up their identification skills. So if you are interested in starting a monitoring program, I would encourage you to start with macroinvertebrates and habitat assessments. This has a range of options in the tier 3 level, different price points, different volunteer time commitment points, and there are templates available now for you to follow, to create your own QAPPs, to create your own study designs, and to produce data sheets. And if you are interested in water chemistry instead, that's going to be next step on our list to tackle. We're hoping to streamline the process of certifying watershed associations or using meters, handheld meters, or continuous meters in the field to collect chemical data. So stream school training, as Carolyn mentioned, she participated in stream school with her volunteers. We do this every spring and fall, and we're always looking for a new partner. We tend to partner with 1 or 2 organizations per stream school, where we'll bring all of their volunteers together to do a big training. This used to be, as Carolyn mentioned, all in 1 weekend, 2 full days. Now we've split it up into several weeknights, webinars, just to kind of slowly integrate the information into the volunteer's brain rather than just dumping it all at once. And then we'll do 1 full day training in the field, stream side. So, but if this is, if that's too much, but you still want to get involved, and there are other opportunities. We had a road salt impact study start this past winter, and this is a very simple tier 1 level monitoring activity. I mailed out, I think, 1,000 chloride test strips to anyone who requested them in the state, and we were able to produce 433 data points so far, in giving us a pretty good indication of how chloride levels are correlated with road density. So the more roads you have in an area, the more road salt is applied to those roads, the higher the chloride levels in the freshwater. So if you're interested in participating in this winter, you can save this website, njwatershedwatch.org/road salt, and we'll start mailing out these strips in December. But sooner than that, if you are interested or near an area that has a lot of harmful algal blooms, and we're also offering now an equipment loan program of the Turner fluorescence meter. And so you can kind of see over here, there's a little picture of this meter. It's a little handheld thing, very easy to use, very easy to calibrate. And it measures phycocyanin levels, the levels of which are correlated with cyanobacteria cell counts. So this is an easy way for us to go out and say, wait, is this light green? Maybe, let's actually measure it and share that information with DEP. And if there are any suspected harmful algal blooms, then we can go through this process, collect additional samples for toxin testing, do additional testing with DEP, and then if applicable, confirm these harmful algal blooms or close water bodies. So there's tons of different ways for you to participate, for you to get involved in community monitoring in New Jersey. Again, njwatershedwatch.org. Check it out if you are at all interested. And I thank you for your time.